Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello and Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Suno Tonight with Saadia Afzaal. We are back with yet another episode of our series Islam and the Modern World. Netanyahu knows he can get away with everything. He knows in the name of self-defense, no one will question Israel, even after the slaughter of more than thousands of children, women and men in Gaza. He knows video leaks of his soldiers raping Palestinian prisoners will not hurt Israel and its reputation. He knows whatever inhumane actions he takes or attacks the sovereignty, security and national dignity of other nations, he will get away with it. Netanyahu and Israeli war cabinet are well aware that they control the United States and powerful Western nations, and no one has the courage to raise their voice against Zionists' atrocities in Palestine. Matter of the fact is that Netanyahu and his cabinet is absolutely right. They know that Israel controls all the powerhouses. We are not the only one to point out this fact. On May the 28th, 2024, British rock guitar legend Eric Clapton in an interview claims that Israel is running the show. Eric Clapton made these remarks when, in the context of Columbia University protests, the Senate committee chairman was asking the president of the university some pointed questions, saying, "I just want to hear yes or no, don't talk to me about the context. Are you promoting anti-Semitism in your college, yes or no?" Clapton said that it was the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, who was behind the investigation. It's a lobby. Israel is running the world. Senate hearings sounded like Nuremberg trials. The Nuremberg trials were a series of criminal justice proceedings held by the victorious Allies against the serving high-ranking officials of the defeated Nazi German state. Getting back to Israel's influence in the US policymaking, American Israel Public Affairs Committee plays key role in building Zionists' hold. It is the largest pro-Israel lobby in America, which contributed more resources directly to the candidates than any other lobby. 98% of AIPAC-backed candidates won their general elections races in 2022, and in total, 365 pro-Israel Democrats and Republican candidates were financed. Additionally, the lobby helped to defeat 13 candidates who would have undermined the US-Israel relationship. Similarly, after taking the oath of the office of the President of the United States, Joe Biden assigned major positions to Jew leaders, including Secretary of State, CIA Deputy Director, Attorney General, Director of National Intelligence, Chief of Staff, Secretary Homeland Security, National Security Agency, Cybersecurity Director, and Secretary of Treasury were few of the important portfolios occupied by the United States' 2% population. These portfolios play a key role in implementing the Israeli policies. Whereas if we look into the political landscape of Muslim nations, and more specifically the Middle East, we can imagine that the scope of independent foreign and security policy is limited. Muslim nations entirely or some of them partially rely on the security apparatus of the United States. The US military has an extensive footprint in the Middle East and maintains its forces in more than a dozen countries, like a watchdog on ships throughout the region's waters. In the past year, with Israel's invasion of Gaza and growing threats from Iran, the US has expanded to deter Iranian threats. In total, the US has military facilities across at least 19 sites, 8 of them considered to be permanent, including Bahrain, Egypt, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and the United Arab Emirates. The other important military bases exist in Turkey and Djibouti as well. Out of 8 key countries, 6 countries excluding Syria and Iraq heavily rely on the US military presence for their own security, and American dominance reflects Israeli footprint in these nations, and they can't take measures against the wishes of the US. Israel controls the United States, and the United States ultimately controls the major powers of Arab nations in the Middle East. if we move beyond the horizon of the Middle East, the nations like Pakistan and Bangladesh are already under the Western influence and either need military hardware or financial assistance from important international financial institutions. The remaining part of the Western nations, including the European Union, Canada, Australia, or Japan, are already under the American dominance. Hence, British rock guitar legend Eric Clapton was absolutely right in saying that Israel is running the show and Israel is running the world. And we have to live and survive in this world. To discuss this, we have with us in Islamabad studios Mr. Sarfaraz Ahmed Rana, lecturer international relations at NAML Islamabad. Thank you very much, Mr. Rana, for joining us. With you, we have Dr. Saira Nawaz Abbasi, Senior Associate Professor, Department of Humanity and Social Sciences, also PhD in Russian Foreign Policy in the Middle East. Thank you, Dr. Abbasi, for joining us. Joining us from Lahore studio is Dr. Zulfikar Ahmed. He's lecturer Social Sciences and Humanities at Minhaj University and FAST. We welcome you, Dr. Zulfikar, on the show. Thank you very much for joining us. And we also have in audience our university students who will be given this opportunity to ask their questions. I'll start with you, Mr. Rana. A short question. Is Israel really controlling the world?
Yeah, I mean, you have, highlighted quite important areas in your introduction. I mean, you have started with Israel is controlling the policy process in Middle East, and also, you have highlighted some of the important bases that America has been maintaining. There are certain things, of course, there is no doubt about it that Israel is, as you mentioned, running the show. I would say that Israel is basically guiding the policy process when it comes to, the foreign policy in the Middle Eastern countries. And I would say that, this is not something new that we see that Israel is somehow controlling the foreign policy towards Middle East. I mean, this is, I mean, you have to go back and you have to study the history of, the creation of Israel, that how basically Israel was being created, and then you have to study also the history of those 4 to 5 wars that Israel so far have fought against all the Muslim Arab nations, and how basically Israel was basically being backed up and being supported by earlier France and some other Western countries, and then later the responsibility was basically being taken by United States of America. There are certain things I would say that, as you mentioned about some of the important lobby, and I would say that there is a APAC, American Israel Policy Public Affairs Committee. I mean, historically speaking, this is one of the most important committee or lobby which has been created so far, in the history of politics and in the history of international relations. And I would tell you that, this lobby and this APAC, we say that, American Israel Public Affairs Committee has been working on 2 broad strategies. Number one, the first strategy they has been working on that, they exert significant influence over the public policy, in CIA, in White House, in Pentagon. And the second strategy, that they have to ensure the public discourse of Israel, that it remains favorable, right? Why? Because they always talk about that, Arab countries, or let's say the Muslim countries in the Middle East are somehow creating an existential threat to Israel. That's not true. Why? Because now Israel is basically creating some kind of existential threat to other countries. You see? Absolutely. I mean, Israel is the only strong military in the Middle East, located right there, right? And it is being crowded by more than 20 countries, the Muslim countries, right? Now, all those 20 countries are basically being fearful. Why? Because they have the absolute and ultimate sense of security in the form of, the nuclear weapons. The only country to have the nuclear weapons, the only country to have the strongest military, right? And I tell you something important, that, Israel's security in the Middle East, America always considered that it is basically the American security. And America always ensure, every president of the United States of America, they, ensures and they guarantees that, nothing goes against the strategic interest of Israel in the Middle East. So these are quite,
even in the US, you see their people sitting in all big offices, sitting in all top positions, so involved in every decision-making process.
Yes, so I mean, this is quite alarming. I mean that and there is another sense that which prevailed, that it's not the rest that hates the West. My understanding about is that it is the West. There is something, there is some serious problem in the DNA of the West. Why? Because theoretically speaking, I would say that there is some problem with their mindset as well. Why? Because somehow I try to understand that they are somehow influenced by the race theory. And that race theory suggests that only the white race can control, and they have the claim and the right to dictating the agenda of the world.
The chosen people,
chosen people,
the land,
and
the holy land.
Yes, I mean, and there is another aspect that when you read the history of some other civilization, I would say that the Western civilization is the only civilization that had killed more people so far as compared to any other civilization in the past. I mean, there are certain things, and I definitely share the same view as you said, that that currently Israel through its lobby, and that American Israel Public Affairs Committee, they are controlling the policy agendas towards Middle East, and as well as globe as well, and they are running the show. Yes,
absolutely. Moving on to Dr. Saadia Abbasi, we see these days all Muslim countries in one way or another are heavily dependent on external sources, on Western global powers, especially if we talk about the US, which is an ally of Israel. Either it's technical support, it's financial support, or any other. Their dependence is there. So how can these Muslim countries diversify their partnership to be in a better position, in a better bargaining power, or maybe just to decrease this dependency which they have on these Western powers?
Thank you very much. Actually, this is the dilemma that you are pointing out and you are discussing about. I would first like to add into your first question that the scenario has there is a lot of change in the scenario, as in you're right that Israel is controlling the US policy towards the Middle East, but we also have to see that there is a kind of rift between Netanyahu and Joe Biden regarding the Israel's atrocities in the Middle Eastern region towards Palestine, especially and particularly when they attacked the Iranian consulate in Damascus. So that put pressure on the US, and their public opinion is also against them, so that put pressure on the Joe Biden. So there is underlying rift that we must take into the consideration.
I understand this part, putting pressure on the US or on their president, but does it put pressure on Israel? So obviously you and I, we both have seen the answer is no, because Israel thinks it can go scot-free, whatever it does, it's not answerable.
But that signifies the failure of the policy of the US and the Israel also. So we must take that into the consideration also. Now moving forward towards your question about the role of external powers in the Middle East and how to diversify the Muslim countries. We have seen now the Chinese role in the mediation process, particularly the recent Beijing Declaration, where they have arranged a meeting and kind of create a consensus among the different factions which have disagreement over the political solution of the Palestinian issue. We have also seen that the Russians, they are also inclining towards the Iranians, and Iranians also are very much inclined towards the Russia. So in this way we can see that there is the diversification, and there is a lot more trust towards the Chinese, because Chinese believe in peaceful coexistence. and their policies depends upon integration, non-interference, and they don't want to have the military bases. Although we see the Russian military bases in the Syria after the Syrian war, but the Chinese, they have different policy orientation towards the Middle East. So the countries, they look towards China's role in the Middle Eastern region. Now we also have seen the 10th ministerial meeting of the Arab Forum that China has created, in which they have invited many Arab states. But we also need to not forget one thing, that although the states have weakened like Iraq and Egypt, where they can pose threat to the Israel, but we should not underestimate the role of the proxies that is called the axis of resistance. For example, Hezbollah, Houthis, Hamas. Now they are more aligned with the Iranians, and Iranians are trying to and the Arab states, and particularly Iranians, they are trying to accomplish their objectives through the role of proxies. So there is a more win-win situation for the Arabs without actually directly involving into the conflict. They are trying to achieve, or they are achieving their objectives through the role of proxies.
Right, but we briefly touched upon this technological or economic independence. I would like Dr. Zulfikar to highlight this issue more. One major aspect, I think, which we don't talk about is the lack of unity among Muslim countries. How important it is for Muslim countries to strengthen their regional alliances and cooperation in order to present a more unified front to counterbalance this Israeli influence?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity for such an important topic. That's very true. Unfortunately, we Muslim countries are lacking for unity. And more than unity even, the Muslim countries, they are lacking for the leadership. And that's truly very unfortunate, starting if we are having the historical background, starting from after the First World War, when Israel was planted there, and so on. Soon as Israel announced its independence, few of the Arab countries, they attacked on Israel, and ultimately they were defeated because it was not a proper plan. It was just an attack, or maybe it was an emotional step taken, but without a fruitful result. The Muslim countries, they are having the best resources in the world. The Muslim countries, they are having the best brains in the world. But unfortunately, because they are divided, unfortunately, they are not in a position to take any kind of step against any anti-Islamic element, or maybe any anti-Islamic movement.
Okay, right, that's my point. Please explain this, please elaborate this more. Why are we not in that position? That's exactly what I wanted to talk about.
Because in second Islamic conference, it was held here in Pakistan, the Arab countries and all of the Muslim countries, they decided, and it was announced, it was a prominent word that was used, the Islamic bomb, because that was decided that if the West is not giving us the favor, and if we are facing the such problems, then of course we are going to hold the petrol. And that was given the title Islamic bomb. And after that, we can see all of those prominent leaders, those who were gathered there in Pakistan, and they decided for the unity. One after one, they are killed, or maybe they are killed, or maybe they are targeted, like Saddam Hussein, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, Shah Faisal himself.
True.
Because unfortunately, we are having such elements.
What's the way forward? How can these Muslim countries take initiative, or at diplomatic level, if I may ask Dr. Rana?
Saadia, you know, I would beg to differ with both of the learned panelists. First of all, I would like to, you know, add some of the point that, you know, Dr. Abbasi has mentioned about that, you know, this is a through advancing or driving your policy through proxies is a win-win situation for the Muslim world. I would like to emphasize here that the Palestine cause has always been a source of division in the Muslim world instead of source of unity. I mean, you just look at the Jamal Abdel Nasser time, and as of today, not even a single moment in which all the Muslim world got united, over the cause of Palestine or some other Muslim causes, including Kashmir, right? So there is always a division on the issue of Palestine. So I would beg to differ here.
Okay.
Number two, there is a thought, or there is something that the other panelist says that it was an Islamic bomb. It is not an Islamic bomb. Saying Pakistani bomb an Islamic bomb, right? It is just you are just trying to make a Pakistani bomb controversial.
Okay.
We live in a world where national interest comes first. This bomb was basically made to ensure Pakistan's national security. Why? Because our survival was at stake just because of neighboring country. So it is not an Islamic bomb. And number two. Number three, I would say that yes, Pakistan should take a stand on Palestine based on human rights violation, Geneva Convention and all those things. But Pakistan, I'm of the view that Pakistan should not be taking the lead role. Why? Because some other countries which are economically stable, which are politically stable, for example Saudi Arabia, for example UAE, for example Egypt, Turkey, they should be taking the leading role. Why? Because Pakistan already facing some of the many problems. Why? For example, you see Pakistan is facing the problem on Western Front, Eastern Front, with India, with Afghanistan. It is the responsibility of the rest, for example, China, Russia, Turkey, and including Pakistan. Why not? They should sit together and they should find the solution of Palestine.
Right,
yes.
They should find the solution. We'll take a break here. When we come back from the break, we'll have the floor open for our audience to ask their questions right after this short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Suno Tonight with Saadia Afzaal. We are discussing whether Israel is controlling the world or not. That's the debate we are having in our studio today. We'll open the floor for the audience. We'll take first question for Dr. Saira. Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Iftikhar Ahmed. I am a student of English literature from Federal Urdu University, Islamabad. I have a simple couple of questions. Number one is how would a war in the Middle East affect neighboring Islamic country politically and economically? The second one is what are
one question? Okay, go on.
What are the potential risks for Islamic solidarity in the region if this conflict breaks out?
All right. Dr. Said.
Taking your first question about the effects of the current conflict in the Middle East, how it will affect the world. We all know that Middle East is very important region for its sources of hydrocarbon as well as the choke points in the waterways and trade routes. So if anything, any chaos would be erupted and any escalation would take place, of course that would disrupt the global communication lanes, particularly the supply of the oil. And we already have seen that in the wake of the Ukraine war, after the Russian and the Ukrainian episode, the world is already facing a lot of troubles. So if any escalation could take place in the Middle East, that would have effect on the global supply chain. As well as, of course, politically, we have geopolitics. In the context of the geopolitics, we have to see that any kind of escalation would take place that would bring the major states into the conflict. And that escalation could be worse not only for the Middle Eastern region, but also for the entire world, because if there would be, like, the Israel is trying to expand the scope of the war, and they wanted to bring Iran into that. If that could take place, and if there is a direct confrontation between the US and the Iran, which US is trying to get away with, so that would bring more worsened situation.
Right, and this regional war has got that potential to become a world war.
Yeah.
Right, second question for Dr. Zulfikar.
I actually have a question for Mr. Rana.
Sure, go on.
Assalamu alaikum. So you mentioned that the Muslim countries need to sit together and they have to strategically think of how to, counter the Western agendas and everything. My question is, it's quite obvious that we cannot 100% get free from their agendas and everything. We cannot get rid of the Western influence over us, not completely, not 100% Western influence free Middle East. I don't think that's going to exist anytime soon. So is it that we need to try and find strategies to peacefully coexist with them somehow? Or do we need to find their weak points? Because I think no hemisphere in the globe is completely powerful. In the current times, we've seen that the Western world is socially deteriorating. I mean, they have their own weak points as well. Islam has given us a lot of strength in many different areas, which the West isn't strong in. So is it possible that the Muslim countries sit together and they try to think of the weak points of the West and work on them and use those points against the Western power?
Right. Good question.
Right. I mean, I would like to answer your question in a way that, we live in a world which is quite complex, and, every country is these days is more concerned about the national interest instead of just focusing on pan-Arabism or pan-Islamism, that the Islamic world will get together under one umbrella and they will be protecting, one cause or promoting one cause. So I mean, let's say, let's take an example of Saudi Arabia, right? We have a serious issue with Kashmir, right? And there is a serious crisis going on after those 2 articles which are being removed by the Indian authorities. But you see what Saudi Arabia and UAE has been doing. I mean, in terms of investment, there has been a massive flow of investment in India by these 2 major Muslim countries. So they are least concerned about the Kashmir cause, right? And I would come to answer your question in a way that, let's see that what's going on in Palestine. They are their own Arab brethren, their own Arab brothers, right? And more than 40,000 people so far have been slaughtered, and with impunity. And I would say that where is Arab world? I mean, they're quite passive. They're not even talking about, they are not even open-heartedly condemning, the Israeli act of, that I would say the barbarism, right? So, I mean, we live in a world, these things are, quite, in theory quite good, in theory, but in practice, I mean, you cannot implement, you cannot even think in a world we live today, right? Every country is more concerned about their economic interest, their own strategic interest, right? And we live in a complex interdependent situation, right? As I mentioned about earlier that, there is a city which is being built in Saudi Arabia, Neom. All the modern technology has been, coming from Israel through third party in Saudi Arabia. So do you think Saudi Arabia can, put their own interest at stake by doing something nonsense, right? Number one. Number two, as far as you're talking about, the weak points of the West, I do agree. But West is too smart for the for the Muslim countries to be exploited, right? They are too advanced politically. Their institutions are quite strong, democratic societies, open liberal societies, right? And in terms of innovative and modern ideas, right? As compared to West, if you look at the Muslim world, how many Muslim countries have the effective institutions to think beyond certain lines? How many countries? I mean, all those countries in the Muslim world, I mean, you name just 1-2 countries which are fully functional democracies. They have the fully, functioning institutions. So my concern is that, I mean, you try to find or exploit the opportunities when you have the effective institutions in place. When you are coming across with certain innovative ideas in your countries are close-knit. You do not have the proper institutions. Somewhere you see monarchies, somewhere you see dictatorship. So in such an environment, do you think that, when countries are basically being controlled by individuals, when countries are being controlled by individuals, right, you think that the countries will be in a position to exploit such opportunities? So the answer is no.
So
Muslim
first
world
you have
cannot
to work on your own
stuff.
stuff.
You need to first work on your own stuff.
Welcome back to Suno Tonight with Saadia Afzaal. We are discussing whether Israel is controlling the world or not. That's the debate we are having in our studio today. Please, go on.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. My question is why Middle East nation is always fail to maintain their own security setup? Why they always relies on American security setup?
Right. Why do they rely on the military and security operators of the West?
Actually, the Middle East, they couldn't have such great infrastructure, or maybe like we are having the example for Saudi Arabia. Since the oil was discovered, they were relying on oil only. And now when they are facing the situation that maybe in near future the oil reserves are to be ended, they are having the other projects like Neon City, and they are trying to develop Saudi Arabia as a visiting spot as well. So these are different reasons. Like in, we can have the UAE. Even in UAE, they are having their offices, or maybe they are having such conditions, but that they are not self-dependent totally. They are not self-dependent totally. That is the reason for which the Arab countries, or maybe the Middle East countries, they cannot have such unity. Like the China has been developing for last many years economically. China has become an economic tycoon. They are having such infrastructure. Until and unless the Muslim countries, or maybe the Arab countries, they are having the same target to achieve the high level like China has, till the time they are unable to have the unity, till the time they are unable to have the decision power, they are unable to influence the international politics, or maybe international affairs regarding especially the Israel and Palestine issue.
Right. So basically, we haven't actually employed those strategies to foster this independence which we needed. One last question. Please go on.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Danish Musaf from Namal, and my question is to Sir Sarfaraz Rana. I had a question about Zionism, but after listening to you, I have another question from your conversation. As you mentioned that Israel-Palestine conflict is instead of pulling together Muslims, is raising conflict or dividing the Muslim world. But don't you think this problem, or like this scenario, is a test for whole Muslim Ummah?
I mean, without a shadow of doubt. I mean, of course, that issue has become a point of and the source of embarrassment for the entire Muslim world. And as I tell you, yes, why not? I mean, it has become a test case for the Islamic Muslim world. The filthy rich countries, I mean, just looking as an audience, I mean, they're sitting just far away, and then their own Muslim brothers being slaughtered and killed, and 2 million people have been misplaced. I mean, what are they waiting for? I mean, they are waiting for the Israel will drop 2 nuclear bombs on Palestine and the Gaza Strip. I mean, of course, it's a source of embarrassment for the Muslim. If they cannot protect the Palestine, they cannot protect anything. Yes. Number one, I would like to add something to your question you asked. It's not about the infrastructure. I do not, again, I beg to differ here. I beg to disagree. It is about the political will of the Muslim world. Why? Because there is not a political will to get united and, to stand under one umbrella. Why? Because, again, they have separate national interests to pursue. And they have been pursuing, for example, if you look again, how the Middle Eastern region has been created. I mean, there was, like, Middle Eastern region was created, in post-World War II in 1945. And it was like, this region you keep, Saudi Arabia, Hijaz, this region will be given to that family and that family and that family. In this fashion, this region has been created. I mean, the Middle Eastern territories has been divided among the stakeholders as the war booties. That you keep this region, and what was the criteria to grant those regions? Basically, their loyalty to the West, their loyalty to the Britain, their loyalty to the America, United States of America. In such an environment, how can you expect that, the Muslim world got united under one umbrella? No. It's not possible
because of the lack of the will. One last comment, please, if you want to add something.
Research and development also, because their focus is not on the research and development. There was a time when Muslims were ruling, because they were very good universities and institutions.
But 1253 was the last year.
We have lost that.
Yeah, we have lost
we have lost that, and the Muslim leaders are now the trend is now changing. Now, like the good universities are establishing in the UAE and even
So
Saudi
you're
Arabia.
hopeful.
Yes,
You're
I am
not.
hopeful.
No, it's not. You know, I'm an optimistic, but I'm not a blind optimistic.
Yeah.
I
point,
show
fair
a
point,
positive
yeah.
picture, but you know there must be some logic and justification to show the optimistic picture to the youth. We should not be lying to the youth. Okay, there is a rosy picture.
So
Okay,
the
things will be
Muslims should
fine and
work
settled.
on the research and development more than
But right now, I
focusing
mean,
on
In the
everything
last
is not
1000 years-
hunky-dory. Everything is not, as you said, we should not present that rosy picture to our youth here. I have to wind up here, unfortunately. I have run out of time. Mr. Sarfaraz Ahmed Rana, Dr. Saira Nawaz Abbasi, and Dr. Zulfikar Ahmed, thank you very much for joining us. That's all for tonight. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night and Allah Hafiz.